You felt this before. That moment in a conversation where something shifts, a micro-expression, a word chosen just a little too carefully, a silence that lands half a second too long, and you catch it, you notice, and then you look around and realize nobody else did. And for a second, you genuinely wonder if you made the whole thing up. You didn't. What's happening in those moments isn't overthinking, and it's not something you invented to feel different. There's a well-researched reason some brains work this way, and if this sounds like you, there's a good chance nobody has ever explained it in a way that actually felt true to your experience. So let's try to do that. Every brain is constantly filtering the world around it. Right now, there are hundreds of details in your environment that your brain has already decided aren't worth your attention. It's doing this on its own, below the surface, like a bouncer at the door deciding what gets in and what stays outside. For most people, that filter runs pretty hard, efficient, built to get a good enough picture of what's going on as quickly as possible. And well, most of the time, that works. Fine. But it has a limit. There's a concept in psychology called latent inhibition, basically the brain's ability to tune out things it's already decided don't matter. High latent inhibition means a lot gets blocked before it ever reaches your awareness. The background hum, the change in someone's posture, the slight weirdness in how something was said, gone, already filed away as background noise. And for most people, that's the right move. But some people have lower latent inhibition. More gets through. More signals, detail, information. And on its own, that's not actually a good thing. Without the ability to make sense of it all, it would just be overwhelming. What makes the difference is what the brain does with it after. In the 1990s, psychologist Elaine Aron identified something called sensory processing sensitivity, a trait found in roughly 15 to 20% of people. What defines it isn't being fragile or too emotional, even though that's usually how it gets described. At its core, it's about processing things more deeply, taking in more, sitting with it longer, picking up on patterns that other people already moved past. Aron's research described this as a built-in trait with an evolutionary reason behind it, a kind of stop and look before you act strategy found in over 100 species. And there's a simple way to understand why this matters. In 1999, psychologists ran a study where people watched a video of a basketball game and counted the passes. While they were focused on that, a person in a full gorilla suit walked right through the scene. About half the participants didn't notice. Not because they weren't paying attention, they were paying a lot of attention. But when the brain is locked onto one task, it starts blocking out everything that isn't directly related. The gorilla got filed under not relevant and basically stopped existing. This is called inattentional blindness, and the more tightly focused your attention is, well, the more invisible everything else becomes. Now think about what it means to be someone whose brain doesn't block things out that aggressively. You're watching the basketball video, you're counting the passes, and you also see the gorilla, and you notice one of the players looks tense, and something about the whole thing just feels slightly off to you. Same video as everyone else, completely different experience of it. But there's another thing that usually gets left out. That way of taking in the world doesn't feel like a strength at first. It feels confusing. The person who ends up being unusually perceptive spent years feeling slightly out of place without being able to say why, just feeling a little off, saying something that felt obvious to them and watching it land like it came from nowhere, sensing something was wrong in a situation weeks before anyone else said anything, with no good way to explain how they knew. And over time, something specific starts to happen. When you keep picking up on things that other people miss or wave off, you start to quietly question yourself. It doesn't happen in an obvious manner. You just hesitate, hold back, you second guess. And that's not a lack of ability, it's what experience teaches you. It's years of being right about things and watching it not matter, which slowly trains you to trust yourself less without anyone ever telling you to. It's a learned response to a very specific kind of life, and it tends to create a particular kind of person. Someone who can read a room really well, but freezes up when it becomes personal, because the closer you are to something, the harder it is to see it clearly. Okay, there's also a real cost to this that's hard to see from the outside. If your brain is taking in more, it's also working harder to deal with all of it. A brain imaging study found that people higher in sensory processing sensitivity had noticeably stronger activity in the parts of the brain tied to awareness, empathy, and making sense of what you're feeling, including regions linked to how we pick up on other people's emotions. The brain isn't tripping up, just multitasking. A lot. Which is why social situations can wipe you out in a way that's hard to explain without sounding like you're making excuses. Others are just following the conversation. You're tracking tone, timing, body language, what changed and when, the tension between two people across the hallway, the thing that nobody said but everybody felt, all at once. And there's no real way to turn it off. It just keeps going. Socially, this creates something that doesn't often get named, but is pretty easy to recognize once you've seen it. When someone consistently reads a situation that everyone else only understands in hindsight, the people around them tend to go one of two ways. Either they value it and start relying on it, or, without really knowing why, they feel a little uncomfortable around it. Because when someone sees you clearly, even without meaning to, that can feel exposing. Not in obvious ways, more in small moments. Conversations shifting when you enter, accurate insights dismissed as luck, a subtle sense you noticed something you weren't meant to. No one says it outright, but it quietly shapes your relationships and how much of yourself you let show. So what do you do with this if it's sounding familiar? There isn't a tidy answer. Perception like this is neutral on its own. It doesn't automatically make life better or worse. It becomes useful or exhausting depending on the context you're in and whether you've learned to trust what you're actually picking up on. Because for most people who relate to this, the real cost isn't the perception itself, it's the second guessing, that quiet habit of seeing something clearly and then immediately questioning whether it's valid. And that doesn't usually come from nowhere. It comes from experience, from being right in situations where it didn't matter or wasn't received, and slowly learning that accuracy doesn't always translate to recognition. So over time, you stop backing your own signal, not because it stopped working, but because you were never shown how to work with it. If you've spent a long time thinking you're too much, that you notice too deeply, that you pick up on things you can't always explain and then doubt yourself for it, you probably weren't imagining it. You were picking up something real. The issue was never the signal itself. It was never having a way to use it. Without structure, that awareness turns inward and becomes overthinking, looping, hesitation. With structure, it becomes clarity and the ability to trust what you see without getting stuck inside it. And that difference changes how you move through almost everything. If that's the part you've struggled with, not just understanding yourself better, but actually turning that awareness into something stable and usable day to day, I've put something in the pinned comment that might help. It's a 7-day reset bundle designed around this exact pattern: overthinking, emotional blocks, and building consistent follow-through in a way that doesn't rely on motivation or force. It's broken into simple daily steps, so it's not something you start and abandon, but something you can actually work through. If that feels relevant to where you are right now, you can take a look in the description or pinned comment.